All right, guys, I am here. If you can hear me, please let me know. I'm never quite sure if these my microphone's working on this thing. It doesn't really tell you. Uh yeah, I guess it does down here. But let me know if you can hear me okay. Oh good. Okay. Man, I see I got a load of comments before I even get in here. Oh man. All right. So I guess we'll jump into it. But before I start, I wanted to talk about a couple things real quick. I haven't done an update on my progress in a while. I'm on cruise right now. I've been recovering from a pec injury, and I pulled back to a cruise dose of 250 milligrams a test. I'm running 4 units of GH. I do a little bit of Lantus every day. Mainly the Lantus is prophylactic, but I found when you cruise, then this is kind of my formula for cruising. And I'm not saying you should do this, but this is how I do it and I'm able to maintain my size is just running TRT, what I consider bodybuilding TRT, something like around 1 milligram or slightly less of testosterone per pound of body weight, something like 2 to 4 units of GH and just a tiny little bit of insulin. And it's surprising what you can hold on to. I've actually, even though I'm not training my pec 100%, I feel like I've actually progressed some strength on other exercises, which is wild. And, it's not to say that it's the same as doing super physiological doses of compounds, but you can still maintain and make quite a bit of progress at those little doses. But it's just, the whole, I've had a couple of people ask me, why don't you just come off completely? And there is this old school belief that when you come off, that somehow it resets your receptors, which is just utter nonsense. There have been multiple studies done on this to show that that's just not true. That, and it drives me nuts when I hear these old school guys talking about, oh, you should come off and clean out for 8 weeks. Like, are you really fucking cleaned out for 8 weeks? All you're doing is just creating a hormonal yo-yo, not doing anything. Really, all you're doing is just crashing your testosterone and getting into an estrogen dominant state where you feel like crap. And if you throw in things like Clomid and HCG on top of it to try to recover a little bit while you're off, it's just creating a bad environment. If you're going to come off and you're going to do all the PCT and all that stuff, you need to stay off for a long time, like 6 months, a year minimum. I think it's just coming off for 8 to 10 weeks, like the old school 90 bodybuilders used to do. It's just dumb. You're losing half your gains that you made, and you're probably doing more damage, to be honest with you, because of the hormonal yo-yo. Anybody who's done it, you feel like absolute crap when you do it. So I don't know. I just don't think it's productive. And the whole thing about the, guys saying that when you go back on, you've reset your receptors and you're super responsive. I don't think it has nothing to do with the receptors. The studies have shown that your receptors actually upregulate from being exposed to exogenous androgens. What I think happens, and this is just my theories, and I don't know why people don't think about this, it's just fucking obvious to me, is that you're reducing your toxic drug load, letting your body detoxify from getting rid of all the harsher substances or high doses of things, and you actually get healthy. You're giving your system a break. So if you take a step back and think about it logically, if your blood work improves, you're in a healthier state and you're going to be more responsive to growth when you go back on because you're healthy again. I don't think it has much of anything to do, or it has absolutely nothing to do with resetting your receptors. It has to do with letting your body get back to some sort of state of homeostasis and being healthy again. Also, probably myostatin, comes down, from, I usually reduce my training when I'm on cruise. I don't, cut my volume in half. I just give my body a break. I try to maintain my weight. I don't really try to push weight. So all of these things, I think, go together to sort of reset things. All right, let's look at some questions here. Also, for questions today, I mean, I don't mind answering the PED questions, but honestly, I'm more fascinated with training and diet stuff. So if you guys have training or diet stuff, let me know. I like talking about that stuff better, to be honest with you. I kind of get bored with the PED talks. I know that's what everybody likes to talk about. Um, let's see here. Let me look through some questions here. Um, Ibrahim asks, "Hi, Mr. Paul. Let's see here. Is aspirin necessary for if taking EQ for a period of time exceeding 4 months?" I run aspirin, just a low dose aspirin year round. Um, long story short, I went to a cardiologist many years ago. I had a heart arrhythmia, or what they thought was a heart arrhythmia. It was actually Lyme disease that was causing an abnormal heart rhythm. And I went through all these tests on my heart and found out nothing was really wrong. It was related to the Lyme disease. But he said that he thought that any man over 40 should be running a low dose aspirin year round. Now, there are things that to keep in mind. If you have any sort of ulcers or anything like that, or bleeding risk, it can increase bleeding risk. So that's just something to keep in mind. Aspirin can be hard on the gut, cause bleeding ulcers and things like that. So it's something to keep in mind. But I run fish oil. I'll run aspirin to help with blood viscosity and prevent clotting, because a lot of bodybuilders, and I know a couple people over the past year that have passed away from clotting relating issues. So you throw a clot, end up with a pulmonary embolism, or end up having a stroke or a heart attack or blockage because of it. So we want to reduce clotting risk. And EQ has a reputation for increasing hematocrit and red blood cell count, which by itself probably doesn't increase risk that much. But if you put it in with other factors, yes, you are increasing risk of having a cardiovascular event. And so, this is something that we can do to mitigate that. So some fish oil, running a little bit of baby aspirin or low dose aspirin. I can't remember the dose one. It's like 87.5 or something like that. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm off on that. But low dose aspirin. There's some other things that we can do. Making sure that you're staying hydrated, makes a difference as well. Just a bunch of other things to consider. And another thing, I know some guys like to run tamoxifen year round, which I think, to me, seems like a bad choice. If you look at tamoxifen, one of the issues with tamoxifen is it increased clotting risk. So we don't want to throw a clot if we're a bodybuilder and end up with we already have thick blood. Especially like in contest prep and things like that, where guys already are dehydrated, have thick blood, or using things like diuretics and stuff like that. It's just dangerous. Let's see here. Let's see. What did Eagle say here? I'm not sure I'm following here. I had a friend who was taking 250 milligrams of test and 20 milligrams of ostarine and gained like 10 pounds of muscle. Then he went back on TRT, dosed for 6 months, and did 250 tests plus 50 milligrams and Anavar, and nothing happened. Let's see. I'm not really. I'm sure. Any thoughts on why? Well, the Anavar was probably fake. That's probably why. There's a lot of fake Anavar out there. I mean, it probably was just sugar. Let me go further down in the comments here. We give some other people some run. Here, Ghost BC. Paul, can you go over your eating, your food sources? What's your high carb day look like? Yeah, I got tons of videos up on it, but I'm happy to kind of break it down. I run a carb cycling diet. Justin Harris is my coach. He is the man when it comes to carb cycling. I don't know if it was originally his thought, but Justin seems to have been the one who refined the carb cycling protocol. So what I do primarily, Justin gives you a list of foods to choose from. I do something similar with my clients, and it is a low FODMAP diet. So FODMAP, you can look it up, is a rating system that is used by gastroenterologists for people with stomach sensitivities. And the higher FODMAP foods produce more gas and cause more gut irritation. So with bodybuilding, if we want to keep our digestion high, we want to use low FODMAP foods. And there's some common bodybuilding foods that cause gut irritation that you don't even consider that are high FODMAP, things like broccoli, asparagus, I believe blueberries were on there as well. I just had a client the other day that was having major gut issues, and we went through his diet, what he was actually eating, and we isolated it to blueberries causing the problem. So I stick to a low FODMAP diet. My primary protein sources are 99% lean chicken breast. I use 96% lean ground beef. I use cod. Those are pretty much my protein sources. Occasionally, I'll throw a little bit of protein powder in there. I know I've said on many occasions that I don't like protein powder. You can use it in limited use, and you need to make sure that you get a high quality whey isolate. Do not use whey concentrate or whey concentrate isolate mixes. A lot of the cheaper protein powders will say they're isolate, but they're actually a blend of isolate and whey concentrate, which has lactose in it, and it's going to cause you to get gas and fart and diarrhea and it causes all sorts of gut irritation. So when we're in a size phase, we want to avoid anything that's going to cause gut irritation. And that's my primary reason for steering away from protein powders. Same thing with carbohydrate sources. Like people why don't you eat pasta? Well, pasta doesn't have fat in it. Well, pasta does also cause gut irritation because of the gluten. And it tends to bloat you up. So I stick with mainly rice-based carbohydrates, cream of rice. I use jasmine rice. A lot of people talk about using brown rice, but brown rice, if you're in a mass phase, it's just going to cause gut irritation because of all the fiber in it. And I know we need some fiber in our diet for health, but for optimizing for bodybuilding, pounding food, fiber just kind of gets in the way of that. So what I do is take a fiber supplement before I go to bed so I can pound my food during the day and then get the food in, get the fiber in at night. For fats, my added fats are primarily, we keep the protein, let me back up. We keep the protein fat sources as low as we possibly can, as close to zero, because mostly what you find in protein sources that bodybuilders are eating are saturated fats. So to keep our lipids in check, we want to reduce the saturated fats and keep the EFAs higher. So I'll do additional EFAs from olive oil, almonds, avocados, things like that. High days, on the high days, half the carbohydrates can come from sugary sources. The other half will come from rice usually. The main reason I do the sugary sources on the high day is because if let's say I'm eating 1,200 grams of carbs on a high day, that's 24 cups of rice. There's no fucking possible way I could eat 24 cups of rice in a day. So we have to use some sugary sources to jam the rest of that in. And I'll do things like Gatorade or gummy bears or breakfast cereal, orange juice, you name it. Pie filling, those are some of my go-to sugary sources. I'll try to get as much in through the rice as I can. I'll use cream of rice. Jam, that's another one I'll use to get it in. And we keep the fats as close to zero on the high days as we can because we're using insulin on the high days. And we want to limit adipose storage. Anyway, that's kind of it in a nutshell. JT says, my protein powder has a lactose enzyme, and it doesn't really matter. It still causes gut irritation. Elite Extra, you mentioned you are very into taking your blood glucose. Do you just do a finger prick with a home test? I've already read these aren't reliable, but have you found otherwise? Yeah, so here's the thing. The glucose readings from the finger prick, they are not 100% reliable, but think of them as a canary in the coal mine. If you notice a consistent pattern of increased fasting glucose, you know that something's off, and then you probably want to go spend $100 or $50, whatever it is, to get an A1C test. An A1C test is going to be a more accurate reading of whether or not you have impaired glucose metabolism or you're pre-diabetic or whatnot. So also it gives us feedback too. So if, for example, if we're using insulin, you 100% want to make sure that you're monitoring your glucose levels to see how you respond to the insulin. Now, keep in mind, it's just a snapshot in time. So, a lot of times guys will be hypo and they don't even realize they're hypo. So if you're using insulin, you 100% want to be measuring your glucose pre-meal, or if you feel a little off, you want to be measuring your glucose. It also, what it does too, when you start measuring your glucose, you find out how you respond to certain foods, and it gives you important biofeedback so you can make adjustments to your diet. So if I see somebody is running super high glucose levels from certain foods, we know we push the carbs too far. If you're, if your glucose levels are getting into diabetic or pre-diabetic levels, there's no sense in pushing the carbs further because you're not utilizing those carbs. So we need to take corrective action to to help with nutrient uptake, whether that's using something like berberine or metformin or even insulin. Those are things that we can adjust based off of having glucose levels. Data helps us make better informed decisions. What's up, Tommy? Tommy McGivern. Tommy's been with me since the start of the channel, I think. JT asked me, what do you think about the training style debate that happened on FODS? Because I didn't hear it. Honestly, I don't have a lot of time to listen to other people's podcasts lately. It's funny because I get people accuse me of ripping off other people's podcasts and I don't even listen to them. So if somebody could fill me in on what the debate was, I can comment on it. Let's see. RS5VR. Hi, Paul. I'm a hyper responder to this and I'm a high E2 converter. I got bad acne on my cruise. My E2 was 130. Should I have been on an anastrozole from day one, and how much? And does AI prevent acne? A lot of times, well, acne, first off, is just genetics. Some people are genetically predisposed to it. I can run all kinds of stuff, and I never get acne ever. I didn't even as a teenager. Once in a blue moon, I would get something, but it's just, I lost all my hair. So I got the gene for that, but I didn't get the gene for acne. But yeah, it's usually hormonal fluctuations that cause acne. So it's either DHT is out of whack or estrogen is out of whack. And I'll see it a lot of times when people do pull back on cruise, their testosterone level is lower and their E2 stays high, or it gets even higher sometimes when people are running things like HCG and shit. So you want to make sure that you're keeping your estrogen under control. And yeah, it may have helped if you had run an aromatase inhibitor, possibly. Let's see. Did Dylan Russo happen to talk with you? No, I haven't talked to Dylan Russo at all. I don't even know who he is, to be honest with you. Or Ryan Russo. Sorry, I misread that. I think I've heard of him. Sorry, I apologize, Ryan, if you're somebody I should know. Like I said, I don't pay a lot of attention to other people on social media. Mr. X, what is Hani Rambot actually good at? Picking the right competitors? He only works with the genetic elite? I don't know. This has always been my thing. I don't want to rag on Hani. His guys are always in the best shape on the Olympia stage. So, but I had a coach once tell me that having somebody who's genetically elite is like driving a Ferrari. Everybody looks like a race car driver in a Ferrari. I want the guy that can make a Honda Civic look like a Ferrari. That's what I want, the guy that can drive a Honda Civic like a Ferrari. So I think you're testing your mettle as a coach is what you can get out of people that are not genetically elite. So I think a lot of these top coaches will target dudes that are genetically elite and use them as their poster card for their services. I don't know, but that's just my, and I'm not disparaging Hani. I don't really know the guy. I don't know much about him, but his guys win. So maybe he's just picking the right guys. Maybe he has some secret sauce that we don't know about. Let me look through here. Do you think, let's see, I'm not even going to try to spell this. Do you think Yohimbine do you think Yohimbine would be a good addition for me as a natural bodybuilder during contest prep to reach a leaner physique if you have ever done well? I mean, you're not natural if you're using Yohimbine. It's just, that's what always gets me with the natty guys is like they think just because something isn't scheduled, that means they're still natty. Testosterone's more natural than Yohimbine. It's at least it's something that your body produces endogenously. I mean, yeah, it would help. It would definitely help. Um, let's see, Mario Clavero, effects of 2,000 milligrams of metformin split upon waking and just before bed on body composition. Not diabetic, just looking better absorption and reduction of body fat. Well, I think 2,000 milligrams is going to give you explosive diarrhea. So it would definitely affect body composition because you're not going to be absorbing any of your food. I pushed up to 2,000 milligrams before, and my stomach just couldn't tolerate it. I know I've heard some doctors say that it doesn't really do a whole lot unless you're at 1,500 milligrams. I don't know. I mean, I run 1,000. That's what my doctor has me on is 1,000. Duh, 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 duh. Hey Paul, for a training perspective, any suggestions for someone wanting to bring up their glutes? Yeah, I have this problem too. When I competed in my last show, the judges told me my upper body was great, my quads were great, but I needed to bring up my glutes and hamstrings. I have the white boy ass. I got a tiny ass, so I've been really, really, really focusing on bringing up my ass. I've been doing stiff-legged deadlifts with the dumbbells. I have been doing the glute machine. I have been doing wide pendulum squats, wide stance, almost like a goblet type, like I guess more of a sumo squat, really focusing on squeezing my glutes. I noticed usually when people have lacking body parts, so let me back up here for a second. What I have noticed is that when people have lacking body parts, they do not have a mind muscle connection. I know that's some hokey BS in some people's minds, but there is something to it, I think. You don't actually contract or squeeze that muscle. I have definitely brought my glutes up, and I noticed before that I was not feeling my glutes when I was training legs. And so I changed some exercises, changed form, and I really focused on squeezing my glutes. And guess what? My glutes have come up. Same thing with my hamstrings. My hamstrings have come up as well when I focused on squeezing them and making sure that I feel them. I see a lot of guys like lagging body parts that a lot of guys have issues with making a mind muscle connection. Back is a huge one. A lot of people have a hard time feeling and contracting their back. So if you're not contracting the muscle fully or feeling it when you're training it, you're probably not getting much growth out of it. Sean Turner, sorry. What are your thoughts on implementing T4 on a cut to keep your metabolism humming in a while dieting? Yeah, I mean, I was talking with Dr. Todd about this the other day, and it does seem like there is some upregulation of T4 conversion to T3 when you throw tren in the mix. Tren seems to have an effect on that. So it would seem, I guess it would be a downstream effect of tren. It does seem like it might make sense. I've never tried T4 on contest prep before, so I'm probably not the person to ask, but it seems like it might make sense to use T4 instead of T3 to actually get the natural conversion of it. One says, do you think bad digestion could prevent muscle gain on a bulk and affect fat loss on a cut due to low absorption of macronutrients? Yeah, absolutely. If your digestion sucks, you're not going to grow. If you're not absorbing proteins on a cut, you're going to lose muscle mass. Yeah, I mean, 100%. Digestion is hugely important. That's one of the things that I do focus on with my clients trying to fix. That's why I mentioned the low FODMAP diet earlier. That's why I give people a food list that is a low FODMAP so they can improve digestion. So many people will just tolerate poor digestion. I go back to the protein powder thing. Like every time I talk to somebody who's using a ton of protein powder, I'm asking them, they like to joke about the protein farts. And I'm like, what do you think's happening when you got the protein farts? When you're sitting the protein powder farts, it's fermenting in your gut and you're not absorbing anything. Or if it gives you diarrhea, you're not absorbing it. So what's the point in eating something that messes you up like that? You're not actually utilizing it. Let's see here. Yeah, Mario Claver, that killed me. Yeah, the diarrhea is definitely a factor. But besides that, regarding though, would it help to reduce body fat? Metformin, he's mentioned, even at lower doses, not 2,000 milligrams. Now, I've heard doctors say that 2,000 milligrams is. I've heard some doctors say that 2,000 milligrams is where the magic happens with metformin. I just cannot tolerate it at that dose. But yes, I have 100% seen improvements in body composition with people that use certain people that use metformin. I don't think it's for everyone. I would say if you're younger and your glucose sensitivity is still good, your leptin sensitivity is still good, you probably don't need it. Berberine might be a better option. Usually what I would say, first line of defense is to start with berberine. If berberine's not getting the job done, then move to consider metformin. Matt asks, besides giving blood, what would be the best supplement for thicker blood? Thanks, Big Paul. Yeah, we talked about this last week in the blood work video with Dr. Todd. If you haven't checked that one out, you need to watch that one. That one was, I think, one of my best videos, one of my most informative videos, and I learned a lot from Dr. Todd about blood work during that video. And it's funny because it was got the least amount of views out of anything I posted last month, and I thought it was one of the more informative videos I put up. But we talked about hemoglobin and hematocrit. Hemoglobin and hematocrit by themselves are not always considered increased risk. Now, if you compound that with high blood pressure and clotting factors and already existing plaque buildup and yada, 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 and all these other things, then yes, it can cause problems. But there are people that live at high altitudes that have high hematocrit and they're just fine. There are endurance athletes that have high hematocrit and they're just fine. Now, telmisartan seems to, I've seen or I've heard that telmisartan lowers hematocrit. I have noticed in my own blood work that telmisartan does seem to lower hematocrit. Staying hydrated, I have a home hemoglobin meter, and this is a test if you guys want. Pick a home hemoglobin meter up on Amazon sometime and test your hemoglobin in the morning and test it in the afternoon and notice what the big difference is. And I'll tell you what it is. It's drinking water. Staying hydrated makes a huge difference, and it makes sense when you think about it. Your blood isn't as thick when you're hydrated, and a lot of bodybuilders are walking around dehydrated. Now, that's not to say that it prevents erythrocytosis, but it certainly can help with keeping your blood healthier. Telmisartan seems to help. Watching your iron intake, things like that. Let's see here. Let's see. Yo Bell. Big Paul, glad I caught you live. I have a question about training. When I squeeze my biceps, even without weight, I feel like it's going to explode and it's painful. Is it safe to squeeze that hard? I mean, don't go to the point of where you're going to tear a muscle, but that means that you have a good connection with them. You're getting a good contraction out of that muscle. As with all things, proceed with caution, but I would take that. I'll tell you this. This is my anecdotal observation on that. I've noticed my body parts that I get the painful pumps or the painful feeling in when I'm training are the ones that grow the most. And my shoulders, my God, even just using a hammer or something like that, or anything where I raise my arms up over my shoulders, I get incredibly painful shoulder contractions. And my shoulders have always grown easier than any other body part. It just seems like there's some sort of neurological connection there, or something fires differently with my shoulders. And I've noticed that with body parts that you have that best connection with, that they're the ones that grow the best. Jacob asked me, what's your berberine dose? I do 500 milligrams 3 times a day. It has a very short half-life, so I run it 5 times a day. And you need to run fenugreek with it as well for absorption. I get the suppressor product from First Detachment Nutrition. Shameless plug here for my sponsor, First Detachment. But they have their suppressor product, which has berberine in it and fenugreek to help with the absorption. It's a high quality berberine. There's a lot of shit berberine supplements out there. Use the discount code AB10 if you want to pick it up at firstdetachment.com. JT, what do you think about the studies that's suggesting interactions between telmisartan and aspirin? I have not seen those. I'll have to check that out. Don't know anything about that. Let's see what other questions we got here. Jimmy, have you ever heard Milos talking about the possibility of developing an allergy from eating the same protein sources at every meal throughout the day? Do you think there's any legitimacy to this? It seems fishy. Well, I think if you eat certain foods that are known to cause intolerances more frequently, yes, you can develop intolerances to them. Gluten would be an example of that. In people, Americans eat more gluten than anybody else in the world, from what I understand, and there seems to be more gluten intolerances in America than any other country in the world. So there's not, I don't think, I mean, it's correlative, but I don't think that's a coincidence that happens. Eggs are one that I see a lot of guys, and I'm one of them, that after abusing egg whites over a period of time, that people end up becoming intolerant to egg whites. I've had a lot of dudes that end up getting diarrhea, gas, and having all sorts of problems from eggs, and they have to drop eggs from their diet. I've never heard of anybody getting a chicken breast intolerance. I have heard of people having issues with beef, though, but I think that's a genetic thing from what I recall. And I know there's a certain, I can't remember, there's like a virus or something that causes people to become intolerant to beef. Let's see, what do we got here? Let's see. What other questions we got here? Hey, Mr. Paul, I messaged you on Instagram yesterday. What do you think about 3,100 nanograms per deciliter and 870 on free test on 300 milligrams of test alone? Yeah, you're a hyper responder. I mean, some people, I'm the same way. I can run 200 milligrams of test on cruise, and my testosterone levels are well over 2,000, and my free test is through the roof. And then I've seen other people that barely respond to it. So, yeah, I mean, there are some people that are just, I've seen guys literally, I don't want to name names, but I have a client right now that's literally just running 250 milligrams of testosterone, and he's blown up like 40 pounds over the last year. It's unreal to me. Some people, and then I've seen other guys be on grams of gear and they won't grow. It's crazy to see the difference in response between people, especially after you train, tons and tons and tons of people. Also, guys, on the Instagram thing, I get so many messages on Instagram, and I apologize for not responding to people, but I literally, there's some days that I get over 100 DMs on Instagram. I can't possibly respond to each and every one of them. I do appreciate everybody reaching out, and I really appreciate, I don't want people to feel like that I'm ungrateful or ignoring them. I just can't physically fit everything in my schedule in the day and respond to everybody on Instagram. When I do respond to people, I generally try to do it in public forums, like on Instagram post or in the comment section on YouTube, so that way everybody can benefit from the response. If you send me a direct message, it's not helping other people out when I respond to you. I very infrequently respond to things on Instagram, and I'm probably going to stop altogether because I just can't feasibly do it with my schedule. I have a pretty packed schedule during the day, and it also takes away from the time that people are actually paying me to respond to them. I have clients. Anybody that works with me as a client, I set them up on Telegram so they can direct message me with questions or whatnot. I also do consultation calls if you guys want to. I'm not trying to plug it or push it on anybody, but if you ever want to, and things like this, a lot of guys are charging for, Q&As, live Q&As like this, but I try to get back to the community I love. I love bodybuilding. I love helping people out. So And I know not everybody can afford a coach. And I was one of those people when I was younger. There's no way I could have afforded a coach when I was in college. So I try to give back and help people and pay it forward. All right, so Yo Bell, gear question now. I'm about to start my first cycle, and I decided after a year or more of research and following you and other guys that it would be 250 milligrams of Pharma Bear test a week. Yeah, the first cycle thing, and take this with a grain of salt. I'm not your doctor. I'm not telling you what to do. But these are my thoughts on the first cycle. I see all kinds of guys talking about crazy shit on first cycles. Let's do some SARMs. Let's do Anavar and just see how we respond to Anavar. And it never made any freaking sense to me. I was a dummy. When I was younger, trust me, I was scared of needles. Back in the 90s, it was really hard to find needles because there was the whole anti-drug bullshit that was going on back then. You couldn't find needles anywhere, and I didn't want to stick myself with a needle, so I just stuck with orals, D-bol and Anadrol mostly. Probably the two worst orals to be for a first cycle, but those were the cycles I ran back in the 90s when I was younger. And what never made sense to me, if you think about anybody who gets into the bodybuilding journey, what is the base compound that every cycle is built on? Testosterone. So why wouldn't you start off with testosterone? See how you respond. You may not like it. You may get 8 weeks in it, feel like shit, don't like it, and you say, I never want to do this again. So you might as well find out from the start if you're going to tolerate the base compound that everybody uses in a cycle well. That's what makes sense to me. And usually what I'd say is escalating up doses gradually over a 16 to 20 week period of time to see how you respond, see what kind of estrogen converter you are. You don't have to do anything crazy. Maybe, start off like at a TRT dose, something around, slightly below or at 1 milligram per pound of body weight, and then go up to maybe like 1.5 or something over a 16, 20 week period of time to see how you respond. Yeah, I see people talking about JT talking about other guys charging for Q&As. Look, here's the thing. We do this to make a living. I do my best to try to give back to the community too. And I want to help people out as much as I can. But at the same time, you have to make a living as well too. But I try to make as much, literally everything that you need is probably up on my YouTube channel or in my social media feed. But if you want my time, my one-on-one time, or if you want specific content, I try to make it fair and reasonable. But yeah, you have to make a living too. All right, let's see what we... Tommy, all I did was screw everything that walked on my first cycle. No comment. Yeah, I'm looking through. Like, I think my first injectable cycle, I was just thinking back about it. I did a DECA only cycle. I did a lot of DECA only cycles when I was younger. That was pretty much the dogma back in the 90s. Nobody, or not really the 90s, I'd say the 80s and 70s and 80s, there was no internet really, or not that great in the 90s, so there wasn't a lot of information around on what to do. So we were getting secondhand information on what guys were doing in the 80s, and it was like DECA and D-bol is what guys ran. I think that was my first like injectable cycle, was DECA and D-bol. And all that did for me is give me a nasty case of gyno, and I needed surgery. Got really bloated. Let's see. Tall guy, 84. How much do you bump up the dose when switching from your cruise to your bulk, and then again after the weight increases and gains slow? I always like map out my cycles, what I think they're going to be, but then they never end up going that way. I slowly titrate doses up. I try my cycles, my off-season cycles are usually somewhere between 16 to 20 weeks. I will push until I feel like the wheels are falling off, and then there's no point in pushing anymore. you get to a point where you just start feeling like shit, to be honest with you, after running high doses for a period of time. I found for me, like where the upper end of the threshold that I can tolerate before I start feeling like really like crap is around 2 grams total load. I mean, that's kind of where I started feeling like shit. In the off season, I usually don't go much higher than 1.5 grams total. I have been running milder compounds, things like testosterone and primobolan, primarily. That's what I run now. But I'll start off like so like at the beginning of my off season or at the beginning of a bulk cycle of transitioning from a cruise. Let's say I'm at 250 testosterone, for example. I will just match my primo to my testosterone 1-to-1. So I'll just add in a little bit of primo. So like 250 test, 200 primo. I'll start off there, and then week 2, maybe I'll go up to 3, or maybe 2 weeks in, I'll go to 2 or 3 weeks in, I'll go to 375 and 300, and then I'll do another bump. And I usually try to hit my peak doses somewhere around 8 weeks, but I slowly titrate up. And then, like, if I hit a point where I'm making great progress, honestly, I don't really, if I'm making great progress on a lower dose, I'll ride that lower dose out for as long as I can. And then if I hit the wall where diet is not working anymore and I'm not responding, I will push the dose up to see if I can squeeze a little bit more out of it. But somewhere between the 16 to 20 week mark, the wheels start to fall off and you just need to back off. That's just what I found with my own body. Let's see here. Tommy cracked me up. He had 3 dating apps go on at once. I'm surprised my neighbors didn't call the cops. Oh, man. Dave, I just got my blood work back after a long cruise. LDL came back at 131. I can focus on that and clean it up, but am I okay to start back up primo, GH, and VAR? I mean, 131 is not nutty. They changed the LDL numbers recently. I don't know, in the last decade or so. Don't quote me on this, but I believe that at one point it used to be 150 was considered normal. But they lowered it because they did some studies and basically found that if you're below 100, that your risk of heart attack is pretty close to 0, or having a blockage is pretty close. Sorry, not heart attack, but blockage. The risk are extremely low, below 100. I almost never see anybody on a bodybuilding diet below 100. I mean, it's, a bodybuilding diet plus gear. So I don't know. You can do your best to get it down. For me, there are a lot of it's related to saturated fat intake. You want to keep your saturated fat as low as possible. Keep your EFAs up. You want to do what you can to keep your HDL up, and that'll help keep the LDL down. That's another thing. Everybody that runs gear has suppressed HDL. I mean, I almost never see a blood panel where somebody's HDL is normal. Almost never. It's just how bad suppressed it is. So, the thing that you can control is LDL largely. HDL, there's only so much you can do to control it. Staying away from orals. This is why people think it's because of the liver enzymes that I don't run orals in the off season. The liver is pretty resilient and can take a beating. But orals really crush LDLs and HDL. It really skew your lipids. And I've seen some people, Anavar is considered safe, but I've seen some people running Anavar at 50 milligrams today with single digit HDL numbers, which is not good if you're trying to avoid a cardiovascular event. So that's just something to keep in mind. I limit the orals to only, so if you think about it logically, I limit the orals to contest prep only on the last 6 to 8 weeks of contest prep. And if you think about it, my lipids are always the lowest during contest prep because I'm dieting and doing a shit ton of cardio. So that's the only time of the year when my LDL is low, really, usually is during contest prep. So your risk of lipid skewing during that time is lower. So you're probably safer to run orals on contest prep or cutting phase because of doing all the cardio and, being in a diet and doing low fats. So you can get away with it a little bit more on contest prep than you can in the off season. So in the off season, I generally stay away from orals to keep LDL in check. Let's see. Alex, let's see. I got this wrong. Axial Villabaneva. I don't know. I'm sorry, dude, if I crushed that name. Those on site injecting steroids for growth, like the upper body, are hitting the androgen receptors directly. It doesn't work that way. I don't know where that bro myth came from. The only reason why you get localized or get any like what appears to be localized growth from site injecting your gear is the local inflammation in the actual oil that's deposited in the muscle. There's no localized growth because the the hormone has to be cleaved from the ester and then it circulates through the bloodstream to be effective. So it's not like it directly interacts with the muscle there at the target site. It doesn't work that way. Sean Turner, my LDL on TRT is 53 and HDL is 35. Man, that's fucking awesome, dude. You're a lucky bastard. Not many people have that. Matthew Kuhn, trying to optimize for fat loss. What's a good estrogen range to shoot for? Running 300 milligrams of test and 150 milligrams of NPP. I don't know if NPP is the best choice for fat loss because it upregulates aromatase expression of the testosterone. You're actually going to convert more testosterone to estrogen on a running it with nandrolone. So that's why guys tend to favor DHT compounds, because DHT compounds actually work like I believe they're a reversely binding aromatase inhibitor, but they do lower estrogen. So for example, you can run testosterone with primobolan and you'll actually bring your estrogen down without an aromatase inhibitor. So that's probably a better choice for cutting. And that's why DHT based compounds have a reputation for being dry, because one, they don't convert to estrogen, and they also lower the conversion of testosterone to estrogen. Let's see, RR4298. Let's see. I'm struggling with dropping my test dose or upping my AI. I know you dislike AI. I seem sensitive to gyno, and I convinced myself to drop the AI and then look at. I'm not really sure what he's saying here. So yeah, with the it's not that I dislike AI. It's like guys overuse it. It's you want to be in an optimal range for estrogen. AIs can be helpful for that. But we want to be careful with our estrogen, and mainly because I talked about it earlier, lipid skewing with lower estradiol is going to cause some lipid skewing, and we want to. What primarily kills bodybuilders are cardiovascular events, and we want to keep ourselves from dying from a heart attack, clot, or stroke, or something like that. So, keeping our estrogen within range. I have been running primobolan with my testosterone, and when you run primobolan with testosterone, I found that most people do not need an AI. Video links. Do you think there's such thing as a body fat set point? If you were naturally around 12% for years, but you got fat and stayed at 30% for years, does it make it harder for? Yeah, I absolutely do. It does. Your body strives for some state of homeostasis, and body composition. Here's what I found with guys that I've trained over the years is like, as we have dieted people down for contest prep, gotten people lean, and then they increase their muscle mass, we create new set points, and it becomes easier to hold at a certain set point. Like for example, now, like I can pretty easily hold 270 pounds and stay in the low teens with body fat percentage where I can still see my abs. I couldn't have done that 10 years ago. I would have, I would have had a gut at 270. I don't even really have to pay that close attention to my diet. I can get a little sloppy with my diet. I don't need to run a lot of gear. I mean, like I said, I can cruise on 250 milligrams of test and a little bit of GH and hold at 270 at a reasonable body composition. So yes, I do think there are body composition set points, and you can change that over the years through adding more tissue or just how your body adapts to certain things. Your body does strive for homeostasis, and I think you can reset that homeostatic point. That's why, you hear a lot of guys like, I know like I'll give you Chris Bumstead as an example. A lot of people call Chris a liar for saying he runs 500 milligrams a test and that's all he does. Maybe he is lying, maybe he's not. I can guarantee you that he didn't run 500 milligrams a test to get to the size that he's at, but it's very conceivable that he can maintain his size that he's already at 500 milligrams a test. He hasn't gotten any bigger really over the, I mean, you can't with classic. You have a weight cap where you're cut off at, so you can't really get any bigger once you've hit your size potential. So he probably can get away with running lower doses and not grow. Same thing with food. He's at a new set point. That's just kind of where his body's homeostatic point is at. Now, I'll say it again. People are going to flip out. I don't think he ran 500 milligrams a test to get to that size. I think he ran considerably more. Tom, Caber is a poor choice for cycle design. Yeah, I don't know why people have this fascination with Caber and running it with 19 Norris. I've beat this one over the head so many times, but people run Caber or a lot of ancillary drugs unnecessarily. Like, go get your blood work done, see if you actually have high prolactin. I've looked at hundreds of blood panels with clients, and I can probably 2 out of 100 that I look at actually have high prolactin. And usually it's related to some other secondary cause. Like I had a dude that told me he was using kratom, and that's what was bringing his prolactin up. And another guy that had a pituitary tumor that it was causing his prolactin to go up. I almost never see high prolactin with 19 Norris. And I think people mistake the effects of the synthetic progestin with prolactin. And if you're not lactating from your nipples, you don't have high prolactin. Sorry, you just don't. Doctors, like, if you go in for treatment for high prolactin, that's the first thing a doctor will ask, are you lactating? And if you're not lactating and your levels aren't significantly over the high end of the threshold, they will not treat you with cabergoline. And Caber also, look up dopamine agonist withdrawal syndrome sometime and tell me if you want to deal with that. I see my buddy Colin, my training partner here. What's up, Colin? We'll be at the gym soon doing legs, training booty today. Yeah, I mean, Thor Stormland said you don't need Caber. Yeah, 99% of the time you don't need Caber. And if you're in some weird situation where your body responds to the 19 Nors in a funky way and you have hyperlactin, just lower the dose of the 19 Nor or take something else. I just don't understand the logic for taking for taking something like that. Let's see. Any lower cost money? Yes. Any lower cost alternative for the GH pathway that is worthwhile? That if you can't afford Chinese GH, I mean MK677 potentially. I found it works better in younger guys than it does older guys, but it does seem to work to a certain degree. Acer asking, what is your opinion on running P5P to help with prolactin and 19 North? Once again, I have almost never seen somebody with high prolactin on 19 hours. I just don't see it. I mean, it just doesn't happen. Get your blood work done. Let your blood work dictate what you need. Let's see what else we got here. Thor lower is always best. Yeah, I mean, that's, look, I'm not going to be one of those guys that tell you that higher doses don't work, but for me personally, I want to use the minimum effective dose to get progress. Lower doses, lower risk. I mean, really, the higher you push the doses, the higher the risk you're going to be. And you have to measure out what your risk tolerance is, what you're trying to do. I mean, if you're just a gym bro, it doesn't make sense to run a ton of stuff. If you're trying to get your pro card and you're on the cusp of it, I mean, all right, maybe I can see an argument there. Dan XX, do you recommend Proviron and bulking? Not really. I don't know. It's expensive. I just don't think it adds a whole lot. During contest prep, you can make an argument for it. Money, do you think metformin will mitigate the insulin-related, I'm assuming insulin sensitivity-related issues that MK677 cause? Uh, Probably, but I would start with Berberine first. This is my logic path. I start with Berberine first. That's your first line of defense. See if you can, well, actually, let's back up. Let's start with measuring things first and see if you actually have a problem or you just think you do. Get a home glucose meter and start measuring your fasted glucose. If you see that rising, then get an A1C test. And if you're having issues, then use Berberine. If Berberine isn't getting the job done, then you can make a consideration for metformin. Joey D, what's up, Joey D? Is there any scientific backing on the eating the rice before the steak and then repeating? Yeah, I've never heard that before, man. We'll have to talk about that. I think you mentioned that to me before. I don't know. I just eat them together. I've never heard of. And Joey's biceps are plenty big enough. We don't need any help. I think pasta is the answer, Joey. Pasta and red sauce. That's the answer. All right. Terran C, etc. I don't know. I can't pronounce. I don't know what this name is, but low libido. All numbers are in range. TRT test, total test, no other compounds. Well, you didn't mention estradiol. Estradiol definitely can have an effect on your libido. If it's too low, it will fuck your libido up. If it's too high, it'll screw your libido up. That's usually when I see when people have libido issues, it's usually because their estradiol is out of range. Let's see. Avathakis. I don't know how people's names. I can't come up. What's your go-to recommendation to lower LDL? My HDL are fine. My LDL is around 100. I mean, 100's fine. I mean, really, the first go-to for lowering LDL is eating a diet low in saturated fat. Cardio. Cardio would be another way of bringing it down. After that, you can start with some supplements, citrus bergamot, things like that. Niacin seems to improve HDL, which will in turn lower LDL. And then you can consider the pharmacological route. I would say the next line of defense would probably be ezetimibe. That's something you can talk to your doctor about. And then after that would be statins. Statins are kind of the heavy guns, but statins seem to cause issues with muscle cramps. And I had really bad muscle cramps and aches and pains when I took statins. They really affected me negatively. And I know a lot of people report that with statins. I noticed an immediate drop in my strength when I use statins. I am on ezetimibe, Zetia, currently, and it works really well. All right, I'm going to wrap up soon, but I'll take a couple more questions here. What supplements would you recommend for kidney and liver protection on a cycle? Well, I mean, the supplement that I've seen that has the biggest impact on liver values is NAC. I've never seen anything lower liver values like NAC does. I literally, I don't know if I should admit this, but my first contest prep after returning from a layoff in 2021, I think I was running 150 milligrams of orals a day at the end of my contest prep, and then I got my ALT and AST checked right at the end of contest prep, and they were both in the 300s. This past year, I ran halotestin, which is considered to be one of the harshest orals on your liver, and my liver values at the end of contest prep with running NAC, Tucca, and milk thistle were in the 30s. It was nutty, man. I've seen people with some crazy results from running NAC. The FDA was actually, I don't know if that's still in process or not, but trying to classify it as a pharmaceutical because it is so effective. They want you to pay for shit. The pharmaceutical companies want to take advantage of that. For kidneys, really the single biggest thing you can do to protect your kidneys is manage your blood pressure. Most kidney damage is done through high blood pressure. Managing your glucose levels, making sure your glucose levels are in check too. That can also cause damage to kidneys. Outside of that, supplement-wise, I've heard astragalus can help some. I don't know, but I think the biggest thing you can do is make sure that your blood pressure is in control. What does B say? If your nipple area looks a little bit like a young girl when it's cold, is that possible? Yeah, I don't know. No, it doesn't have anything to do with prolactin. I wouldn't think. Maybe your estrogen is high. Let's see. JT, what do you think would cause a drop in half the amount you could lift and bench on during a cut, but never being able to get it back up? Your previous numbers getting on bulk again, same dosages, no injuries. I had that in my first diet where I went really hard and I lost a ton of strength at the end of my prep. And I think it's just from being glycogen depleted, man. Now, not being able to get the numbers back up to where you were before, you may have lost tissue. You may have lost contractile tissue. You dieted so hard. That would be the only thing I could explain. There's also too, when you're on contest prep, CNS fatigue too. Sometimes if your CNS is completely fatigued. I remember literally at the end of one contest prep where I could not even do 2 plates on leg press. I mean, there were 120-pound girls that were leg pressing more than me. I was so overtrained, and so my central nervous system was so fatigued. All right. Yeah, Colin talked about the esters on the faster or slower acting esters. I don't know why people think that the esters change the fundamental properties of compounds. That drives me nuts. The compound that you're on is the same compound, no matter what the ester is. The tren is tren, no matter what the ester is. Now, what the difference is the speed at which that ester releases the hormone into your system. So, for example, things like tren or nandrolone, I like the faster acting esters in case you get yourself into trouble. You start having nasty side effects and you need to get off quickly and you need to clear your system. So it takes 5 half-lives roughly for a compound to clear your system. So if you have something, for example, like DECA, there's some debate on how long the half-life is. Some people will say 8 days, some people say 10, some 12. I don't know. I've seen it all over the place, but let's just use 10 for simple math. That's 50 days for it to clear your system, whereas the propionate ester is something like 48 hours or 72 hours. I don't remember. So something like 10 to 15 days for it to clear your system if you get into a situation where you have impotence or you have some sort of nasty side effects, some anxiety or yada, yada, that you need to clear out. So you just don't want to be stuck with that in your system forever. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap this up. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. Once again, I just want to say thank you to everybody. The channel just rolled over 10,000 subscribers, I don't know, a week or two ago. And I'm just blown away at the success that the channel has had. I really appreciate all of you that support me and watch the channel. I'm flattered by the following of my content. It really means a lot to me, and I appreciate each and every one of you. Take care, guys.